What if Robb Stark prevented the Red Wedding Part 2? Let's explore the depths of it in the video. Jon Connington and Young Griff gather over the map with the captains of the Golden Company to discuss their next move. Now that they've won over the sellswords, the next step should be simple. Go with Young Griff's aunt in Meereen and combine their forces. But simple doesn't seem good enough for many of the captains. Some of them urge Jon to sail to Westeros without her. News soon arrives that Daenerys is under siege in her city by a host of slavers, sellswords, and even the vaunted lockstep legions of Ghiscari. There is no guarantee she'll even survive this invasion. Running to her aid might only bog them down and drag them into a war that they have no contract with. Harry Strickland remains there, which means no promise of pay. Instead, some suggest sailing to Westeros without her and taking advantage of the chaos left over by the War of the Five Kings. They could land somewhere and launch a lightning campaign that could entrench themselves until such a time that Daenerys could join them. However, Jon Connington is not convinced.
If we wanted chaos, we should have begun our invasion a year ago. Back then, there were 5 kings instead of 1. But King Stannis and the Young Wolf have now joined forces. They brought the rebel Freys and Boltons to heel and secured that for them. Meanwhile, the Roses have married into this coalition. Together, they crushed the Lannisters and took the Iron Throne. No, if we strike now, King Stannis will be waiting for us. He'll have his pet wolf running by his side. I hear the Lannisters are not happy with him. Maybe Sir Kevin might be willing to come to terms and... The Lannisters, after their stunt with the Red Wedding, their name is poisoned, and working with them would only doom our cause. Besides, this is Stannis fucking Baratheon. While you were hammering out contracts, Harry, he was warring. He was barely young Griff's age when he was besieged at Storm's End, and yet he survived a year without relief. I already smashed the Wildling army 20 times his size. He also defeated the evil Lord Bolton. All of that and more. We'd be better off in Meereen, I say. Queen Daenerys has unsullied, sellswords, dragons. We'll need all of that if we're going to take the 7 kingdoms. And all of those are under siege at Meereen. Not the first siege the Golden Company broke. If you want us to rush to our death on the shores of the Stormlands, be my guest. But I would accept payment with unsullied spears, sellswords, and dragonfire. The other captains begin to nod in agreement. A vote is called, and the captains vote overwhelmingly to sail east to Meereen. The Golden Company marches east, their banners rippling in the wind. The golden skull on black, a stark contrast against the dusty Essos sky. Their column stretches for miles, disciplined soldiers in gleaming armor, their horses well-fed and restless. Griff rides at the head alongside Jon Connington as they meet up with a force of Lázars who come to Meereen's aid. The Lamb men are eager for backup and happy to let them take over. Harry Strickland sends messages ahead that declares their intent. The Golden Company has come to aid the people of Meereen against their oppressors. Meereen is on the brink of collapse. Within the city walls, Sir Barristan Selmy leads the defenders, a mix of sellswords, freedmen, unsullied, and pit fighters. Their siege has been brutal on the defenders, depriving them of supplies just as a plague spreads through the streets. Still, while Barristan cannot change that, he can change the battle, as Slavers' coalition has tightened its siege. Their trebuchets hammering the walls, Sir Barristan launches sortie after sortie with unsullied and pit fighters by his side. Together they prevent them from outright storming the walls and even kill a few of the secondary leaders. Despite his age, Sir Barristan still remains one of the best warriors on the field. His longsword moves like a blur, cutting through swaths of foes while his troops fight with equal ferocity, unwilling to give up their newfound freedom. The pit fighters rip through the slavers' ranks, their skill unmatched on and off the fighting pits, while Unsullied move with less flourish. However, their iron discipline prevents the slavers from ever flanking them. Thousands of Yunkish warriors fall, but the noose continues to tighten. They are outnumbered, outmatched, and the cries of the wounded grow louder each day. Each sortie leads to horrific casualties, and one attack nearly takes his life as several pit fighters turn against him. As he retreats to the walls, he receives the news. In his fatigue, he welcomes the sound of the Golden Company's horns. The sellswords arrive like a thunderstorm. They smash into the rear of the slavers' forces, their knights and elephants cutting a bloody swath through the enemy ranks.
Archers find a position on the high ground, raining arrows down on the poorly armored slave soldiers. Sir Barristan retreats back to the walls, barely believing his eyes as the disciplined phalanxes of the Golden Company drive the enemy into chaos. Relief floods him. Finally, they have a chance. The slavers manage to rally their armies behind the lockstep legions, who form a defensive line and withdraw from the wall. They reform their defensive line along with some sellswords and other members of the coalition. However, the arrival of the Golden Company triggers a cascade of defections. The Windblown turn their cloaks and join the frays against their former allies. In particular, they launch an attack on their hated enemy, the Company of the Cat, and rout their forces. The Second Sons, tempted by gold and Tyrion's honeyed words, follow suit, scattering a group of slavers and capturing their leaders. By the end of the day, a path has been opened for the Golden Company and their fair-weathered allies to enter the city as the besiegers move to lick their wounds. The people are greeted with cheers and adulation from the crowds who, while weakened from weeks of siege, rush out to welcome them. Young Griff rides to the front of the column with his captains proclaiming himself Aegon VI, nephew of Daenerys. This drives the people mad with excitement as they hear of this long-lost prince who had come to their hour of need. But Sir Barristan is not pleased with this development, and has Aegon brought to Daenerys' pyramid. Although they hear their story, he remains skeptical. Still, he cannot send them off after seeing their success and how excited the city is. Aegon's presence alone is enough to lift morale. To Jon's surprise, he finds Tyrion among the Second Sons, while Barristan finds Jorah Mormont. The latter is taken for questioning. Tyrion sees the celebration in the city and sees an opportunity. He sees no sign of Daenerys and realizes this is their chance to capture the city's heart. If she is alive and returns, she will find a city in their debt, not hers, which can make bargaining much easier. He urges Jon to take Aegon around the city, parading him and making him seem like a hero to win the people's love. This will ensure the city falls into their hands, and Daenerys will be forced to accept whatever terms they offer. For the next few days, as they organize their counterattack, Aegon travels through the city, dining with nobles, visiting soldiers in the barracks, and comforting the people in the hospital or the streets. There he listens to their stories and struggles, eats some of the same food as them, and understands their plight. When the time comes to attack, they hear of another force on the horizon, the Iron Fleet. Nearly 50 heavy longships smash through the hapless Yunkai fleet. Led by the Iron Victory, they cut through the bay as they bombard the slavers' ships and deliver fresh reinforcements to the city. The siege begins to crumble from all sides. Under Connington's and Barristan's command, the Allied forces launch a coordinated assault. The slavers' coalition shatters under the combined might of the Golden Company, defected sellswords, and Ironborn. The armies of Karth, the Dothraki Khalasars, and the remnants of the slavers' armies are crushed, their leaders falling one by one or retreating. By the end of the battle, the coalition is broken, and its power is shattered beyond repair, and they soon beg for terms. Prisoners are rounded up and paraded through the city, while the stores of the coalition are raided to feed the city that has starved for so many days. Where there was despair weeks ago, there is now a celebration. A lavish feast is thrown, while games are held in the fighting pits, where there is no shortage of volunteers, including Ironborn, knights, and sellswords, joining the pit fighters. Though Sir Barristan ensures these games are only to first blood, even the old knight cannot help but feel giddy at this victory. However, he knows he cannot dawdle, as they have an opportunity to end the war. As Daenerys is not there, he reluctantly allows Aegon to handle the negotiations, as his supposed blood ties to Daenerys are now well known. Under Barristan's supervision, they hammer out the terms. The slave masters are to be pardoned, though their slaves are to be released immediately, and they must forever renounce the practice. Meanwhile, garrisons of Unsullied will be sent to Astapor and Yunkai, while New Gis will not interfere with the affairs of Slaver's Bay any longer. But a few days later, Daenerys appears astride Drogon. The shadow of the Great Black Dragon stretches across the city as nearly 20,000 Dothraki riders flood in behind her. The cheers of the Meereenese mix with the uneasy murmurs of the Golden Company and their allies, all unsure of how the Dragon Queen will react to their presence. Drogon lands with a thunderous impact before the city gates, and Sir Barristan Selmy steps forward to greet her.
Your Grace, Meereen is saved, but there are new allies you must meet.
Daenerys dismounts gracefully, her expression a mix of relief and suspicion as her eyes sweep over the assembled figures awaiting her. Tyrion Lannister bows with a smirk. Aegon Targaryen, flanked by Jon Connington and the Dornishmen Archibald Yornwood and Garrus Drinkwater, from whom she remembers. Victorian Greyjoy, towering and grim, looms with his axe in hand. And then there is Jorah Mormont, kneeling almost immediately, his face lined with desperation.
Your Grace, I swayed the Second Sons back to your cause. I fought for you every step of the way.
But Daenerys cuts him off, her tone sharp.
It was the Golden Company who turned the tide, Sir Jorah. I know what happened here.
Jorah's shoulders slump, and for a moment he looks utterly defeated. Then he bows his head, falling fully to his knees.
I beg your forgiveness. I betrayed you once. But I've never stopped trying to make it right. If I cannot make amends, then at least let me die in your service.
You've made mistakes, Jorah, but I see your loyalty, even if I came too late. Rise, and don't make me regret this.
Your Grace, I've come to offer my service. I know you may question my motives, but believe me, I understand betrayal and suffering more than most.
You grew up in a castle of wealth and privilege. What suffering could you possibly know?
Wealth, yes, but not love. My father despised me for my deformity. He tried to have me executed for a crime I did not commit. More than once he tried to have me killed along with my sister and nephew. If you want proof of my family's monstrous name, I can write you a book on it. If you want them dead, well, I've killed 2 of them already. Tyrion Lannister has earned his place. His mind is sharper than any sword, and his loyalty, once given, is unshakable. When I was being bartered off at the slave market, he could have left me for dead, and yet Tyrion Lannister vouched for me. Let me vouch for him now.
Very well. He can stay. For now.
The tension escalates when Aegon Targaryen, Victorian Greyjoy, and the Dornishmen press their claims.
You need the Golden Company, and they follow me. Together, we can unite House Targaryen and secure the Iron Throne as man and wife. My friend, Quentyn made similar claims before. He promised you Dorne, and you rejected him. We won't do so again unless you make amends, Your Grace. Whatever they offered you is useless without ships. Marry me, and the Iron Fleet is yours.
Daenerys' eyes flash with anger, and she strides forward.
I am no man's prize. Dracarys.
Drogon unleashes a fiery roar into the sky, the flames illuminating the night and silencing the suitors who all step back in surprise.
You will not dictate terms to me.
Then perhaps I'll cut down the others and claim you myself. We are far from the sea, Iron Man. We'll see how well you fare against me. No one threatens my king in my presence.
Before the situation can spiral into violence, Tyrion steps between them, raising his hands.
Enough! If we fight each other now, we'll hand Slavers Bay back to the slavers. Is that what you fools want? To bleed ourselves dry before we even see the 7 kingdoms? Stannis commands a united realm, and if we cannot provide a similar force, then we have already lost.
Reluctantly, the others step back, though the tension remains palpable. Daenerys' gaze sweeps over them, her voice steady and commanding.
Do not forget who the true queen is. I will welcome your judgment and be glad to hear your counsel. Make no mistake, if I choose to marry, we shall be equals. But if you wish to follow me, you will do so on my terms. Otherwise, leave now.
The room falls silent, and for a moment, no one speaks. Finally, Jon inclines his head.
As you command, Your Grace.
The others follow suit, though their faces reveal mixed emotions, ambition, frustration, and grudging respect. For now at least, Daenerys has managed to unite them, but she knows the alliances forged here are as fragile as glass. Soon after, they set sail for Westeros, commanding an army unlike any seen in centuries. Her forces are divided into 3 prongs of invasion, each carefully orchestrated to maximize chaos and exploit the fractured state of the realm. The first invasion targets the Vale, which Tyrion advises has remained isolated and untouched by the wars ravaging the Seven Kingdoms. But they are also isolated politically as Littlefinger continues his schemes. This attack is led by Aegon Targaryen, flanked by Jon Connington and the Golden Company, along with the Windblown, who land along the Fingers in a lightning campaign. The isolated region is helpless to the attack and they quickly secure a landing zone. Saemon Templeton and the other lords gather their armies to face them. Their cavalry is some of the best in the world and rush to meet them. It crashes into the phalanx of sellswords, trying to keep them back. But against the disciplined ranks of the Vale, even these sellswords cannot hold against them. But just as victory seems certain, Jon Connington deploys his elephants. Unused to their smell and appearance, the horses panic at the smell of them and scatter the disciplined charge that was meant to break their lines. The elephants sweep forward, running through their infantry which scatters before them. The Vale Lords, unprepared for such ferocity, fall one by one as the invaders rampage through the fertile lands. Jan Royce tries to make a final stand, but the reinforcements promised by Lyn Corbury did not arrive, leaving him to face the Golden Company alone. He soon retreats in disarray. Littlefinger sees an opportunity as after the Golden Company weakens his enemy, he secretly meets with the invaders. He offers his trump card, Sansa Stark, who could be used to manipulate the Northern Lords. Meanwhile, he even promises the allegiance of remaining Vale Lords. It is easy enough to manipulate Robert Arryn to make this pronouncement after giving him a ride on an elephant. With Littlefinger scheming to align with Aegon's campaign, their forces march south towards King's Landing, gaining momentum with each victory as the Vale Lords reluctantly march with him. Garrus Drinkwater and Archibald Yarnwood are dispatched to Dorne to convince Prince Doran Martell to support Daenerys. Their diplomatic efforts focus on promises of vengeance for Elia Martell, and a new dawn for House Martell in a united Targaryen-led Westeros. To provide sincerity, they bring with them the bones of Quentyn Martell. Victarion Greyjoy lures his brother out by promising that he has brought out the dragon as promised. Euron gathers his forces and the shields to meet with him. The confrontation ends disastrously for Euron, as the dragon rains fire upon his fleet, leaving nothing but charred ships and scorched sea. Euron gets to see the dragon as he wishes, as he goes up in flames. With the Reach's defenses weakened, he garrisons the holdings of Euron. He leaves a substantial portion of the fleet to continue harassing the Reach, keeping their forces occupied as the rest of Victarion's forces shift their focus to the Westerlands, striking at the Lannisters' lands already despised and vulnerable after years of war. Kevan Lannister tries desperately to rally the defenses. While this unfolds, Ser Barristan Selmy and Daario Naharis lead the Dothraki and the remaining sellswords to land near Fair Island, where they pillage across the Westerlands. They storm villages and castles while Kevan tries to deal with them. He attempts a scorched earth policy, burning whatever they cannot carry as they advance east to meet up with Aegon's forces, aiming to split the realm in two. Once the Iron Fleet deploys the land forces, Victarion strikes at the undermanned Iron Islands. With Euron dead, most houses are quick to pledge allegiance to him and reinforce his armies for the third and most daring invasion. Daenerys herself leads the dragons alongside Victarion Greyjoy and Jorah Mormont to the north, Stannis' best commander. Victarion's Ironborn raid the northern coastline while Daenerys attempts to force Robb Stark to bend the knee. Jorah leads a small force to Bear Island and captures it, using it as a springboard. The western coast, already vulnerable from the previous war, quickly falls beneath the Unsullied and Ironborn raiders, along with a host of freedmen. They capture the coastal houses and begin advancing inland. However, Robb proves to be a cunning and pragmatic commander. Avoiding confrontation, he employs the unforgiving northern winter to his advantage. He has his cavalry, led by Mage Mormont, to raid their forces with the northern cavalry. Meanwhile, the Hornwoods and Glovers attack from the Wolfswood, and mountain clans attack from the hills. These slowly weaken his forces. But these small bands are not immune to dragonfire. Wherever they can, Daenerys burns through entire raiding parties of northern warriors. The casualties of the north slowly mount as they push deeper. Meanwhile, giants and wildlings join the attack in the ambushes, harrying the invaders and trying to take down the dragons. Their mammoths terrify the invaders. though the Unsullied managed to break, frightening them off with barrages of javelin. The massive arrows used by the giants can penetrate the dragon's skin and warn them to take heed. Robb's strategy begins to pay off, as supply lines falter and morale weakens among Victarion's forces. Stannis, meanwhile, takes up the banner of resistance in the south. As Aegon advances into the Riverlands and pours into the area, the Knights of the Vale easily smash through the weakened resistance of the River Lords, forcing them to fight a guerrilla war. Stannis gathers his forces, bolstered by contingents of wildlings and giants who now fight under his command. In a stunning series of skirmishes, Stannis defeats several Vale Lords as he tries to block their advance and prevent them from linking with their host west. He defeats several isolated pockets before rushing to Fairmarket, where he meets them. The battle around this town is bloody, as is the host of Stormlands, Crownlanders, and Rivermen, as they clash with the Vale Knights along with the sellswords. The Golden Company's discipline holds, and they manage to force a crossing on the left flank, smashing the Stormlanders present. This allows them to bring their elephants to bear. Meanwhile, the Crownlanders break from a charge of Valemen on the left. It seems like the town might be surrounded, but that is where Stannis unveils his surprise. Giants emerge, hidden in the barns of the town as they come rushing out and crashing into the cavalry. For once, their vaunted cavalry find something they cannot break. Meanwhile, as the elephant and sellswords try to outflank them, Stannis unleashes his mammoths. The great beasts clash with their cousins in the brutal display of tusks and fur. Each clash sends the ground shaking and crushes those unfortunate enough to get out of their way. Eventually, the Golden Company orders a retreat, giving Stannis control of the western Riverlands. In the Reach, Randyll Tarly's disciplined forces march north to the Westerlands, at last providing aid to the beleaguered Westerlands. They resist the Dothraki with surprising effectiveness, refusing to break formation despite the overwhelming ferocity of the horsemen, or their feigned retreat. Yet even Tarly's discipline is tested as the Dothraki, emboldened by their early successes, begin to press harder. After throwing their charges in arrow storms, they follow with an unsullied phalanx. This unbreakable line hits hard, putting immense pressure on the Reachmen and bringing their advance to a grinding halt. Daario and Ser Barristan both lead daring charges that cut the Reach host, while the Second Sons delay Kevan Lannister's advance, keeping those two hosts from joining up. Ser Barristan engages Randyll Tarly directly in a duel that rivals Robert and Rhaegar's fight. All around them, their soldiers fight, sensing blood, but neither one gives any ground or takes their eye off the other. Even with Heartsbane in hand, Ser Barristan remains as graceful as ever, never making a mistake or losing focus until he spots an opening. Randyll wounds the Great Knight, slipping his sword under Barristan's armor and scoring a cut across his shoulder. But as he moves in for the kill, Barristan the Bold slides forward and slips his sword between Randyll's gorget and helmet and slices him across the neck. Seeing this, the Reachmen retreat, with the Dothraki pursuing them at every step, never stopping until they reach the border between the Reach and Westerlands, where a Dornish host is waiting for them, led by Lord Yornwood. At first, the Dothraki cheer their arrival and believe these are the promised reinforcements. But with Tywin and the Mountain dead, Doran has little reason to support Daenerys, especially when it costs him a son. The Dornish suddenly turn on their once allies, archers raising their bows and unleashing a volley on the Dothraki, who scatter in surprise. The Dornish knights strike at their scattered formations, picking them off as Kevan helps rout them. In the north, Daenerys chases a group of wildling raiders to the Gift, where she unleashes fire upon their hideouts and shelters. But in this battle, Robb rallies his forces, including several giants who rush to their aid. Viserion suddenly pulls up mid-flight, screeching unnaturally as his wings falter. He hovers erratically, flames spilling from his mouth in uncontrolled bursts, igniting both wildlings and freedmen forces indiscriminately. His golden eyes glaze over as if caught in a trance. He veers wildly, crashing against the wall with a thunderous impact that sends chunks of ice cascading to the ground. Daenerys tries to control him with commands, while the fighting halts abruptly as both sides look up in horror. Drogon and Rhaegal circle above as they are uneasy. From the gorge, a bone-chilling sound rises, a deep, guttural howl. Shadows begin to emerge from the icy depths, shambling forms with glowing blue eyes. The whites pour out like a flood, their skeletal bodies moving with terrifying purpose. Hundreds of them, led by an undead weeper, his face twisted into a grotesque grin of frozen death. Beside him, another figure holds back, Varmir Sixskins, his hands stretched out toward Viserion, his face twisted in concentration as he tries to force his way into the dragon's mind. Viserion thrashes violently, his tail sweeping through the snow. His roars mingled with eerie cries of the undead. Drogon and Rhaegal dive into the fray, their flames cutting swaths through the whites. Drogon's fiery breath engulfs the Weeper, reducing the undead wildling into ash in seconds, while Rhaegal snaps his jaw around a charging white bear, crushing it with a sickening crunch. Varmir screams, his body convulsing as he struggles to maintain control of Viserion. But Drogon swoops low, his massive talons ripping through Varmir's torso, flinging his body aside like a ragdoll. The bond snaps and Viserion collapses to the ground, breathing heavily as he shakes off the influence. For a moment, the battlefield is still. Both sides stare at the carnage, the frozen ground littered with charred corpses, human, white, and beast alike. Daenerys, astride Drogon, lands amidst the wreckage, her face pale as she surveys the aftermath. She turns to Tormund Giantsbane, the wildling commander.
What was that?
That was the White Walkers. And if they are here, we've got bigger problems than your war, Dragon Queen.
That's our theory. Westeros is a land filled with exciting stories and possibilities, and we love exploring them. If you want to accompany us on this journey across the Seven Kingdoms and beyond, then please like, share, and subscribe to our channel.